Welcome back now for the news in detail. Now, in a telephone conversation with Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said India has violated international laws and UN resolutions by unilaterally revoking occupied Kashmir's special status. Qureshi said Indian actions pose a threat to regional peace and security. Lavrov said Russia is closely observing developments and urged the two countries to resolve the issue through dialogue. Meanwhile, Pakistan summoned the Indian Deputy High Commissioner Gaurav Ahluwalia to condemn ceasefire violations by Indian forces along the line of control. Indian firing killed one civilian in the Hot Springs sector. The Foreign Office says the deliberate targeting of the civilian population is a violation of international law. Meanwhile, Pakistan has asked the United Nations Security Council to convene an emergency meeting to discuss India's illegal annexation of occupied Kashmir. In a letter to the UNSC President, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi highlighted grave human rights violations in the occupied valley. Qureshi said India is planning a genocide of innocent Kashmiris. India is facing the world's condemnation over illegal annexation of occupied Kashmir and the revocation of its special status. Moving on, clashes between pro-government forces and rebels killed 59 combatants in northwestern Syria. War monitors say 29 regime loyalists and 30 militants are among the dead in Idlib and Latakia. They say 3 civilians were also killed in regime airstrikes in the town of Khan Sheikhoun. The fighting between the two rival parties has intensified over the last few days. Earlier, government forces took control of 6 towns and several villages in northern Hama and south of Idlib province. Russia says a summit for Astana process guarantor states, including Russia, Iran and Turkey, will be held next month. The Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov says the states will meet in Turkey to discuss the worsening Syria crisis. This comes on the heels of a ministerial meeting of the bloc in Kazakhstan that opposed foreign intervention in the Syrian conflict. The summit was originally scheduled for the end of the year, but has been brought forward over the escalating violence in Idlib. The meeting will attempt to settle disagreements between Damascus and Ankara over the establishment of a safe zone in northern Syria. The Kremlin says the conference will discuss the security situation, transition processes, a constitutional commission and resettlement in the country. Now, Egypt says Sudan's opposition parties have agreed to build a consensus over the constitutional declaration of civil-military power sharing. The Foreign Ministry says the 2-day meeting of all Sudan's opposition factions hosted by Cairo was a success. It says forces of freedom and change, including the Revolutionary Front, took part in the meeting. Cairo says participants will now consult their leadership in Khartoum on the outcome of the meeting. It says the conference was held to build consensus over the power-sharing agreement due to be signed on Saturday. Egypt says it will continue engaging with Sudan and neighboring countries for peace and stability. Now, Libya has told Egypt to stop interfering in its internal matters. This comes after Cairo issued a statement saying the House of Representatives is the only legitimate elected body in Libya. Libya's High Council of State says Cairo's statement is a violation of UN resolutions. It says all countries should recognize the UN-backed government of national accord as the only legitimate body. The HCS also rejected Egyptian statements on how Libya should spend its revenues. The Council has recommended firm action on the statement. Moving on, President Donald Trump has threatened to pull the U.S. out of the World Trade Organization if the body does not improve its conditions. Trump blamed the organization for unfair treatment, asking it to stop designating China and other thriving economies as developing nations. Trump says Washington does not have to abide by WTO rulings and will leave the organization if necessary. It says the U.S. is disadvantaged as a member of the global bloc. Trump has directed the U.S. trade representative to secure changes in the group to prevent developing countries from using regulations. Loopholes under WTO rules, developing countries qualify for preferential treatment in trade agreements. Earlier highlighting China, Trump said dozens of countries abuse their developing status. The U.S. has delayed the imposition of new trade tariffs on China until December. The two countries have agreed to have another round of negotiations in the weeks. This follows the conversation between China's Vice Premier Liu He and U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer, plus U.S. Treasury Secretary Stephen Chen. U.S. President Donald Trump says he made the decision after a very good phone call with China. He says he believes Beijing is ready to make a trade deal. Earlier this month, Trump said the U.S. would enforce an additional 10% tariff on the remaining Chinese goods from September 1st. Moving on, flight operations at Hong Kong airport have resumed amid warnings over ongoing protest. Last night, police and protesters clashed at the airport after flights were disrupted for a second day. A police officer was also injured in the clashes. Check-in counters opened to help the hundreds of weary travelers waiting overnight for flights. 10 weeks of increasingly violent clashes have plunged the Asian financial hub into its worst crisis. Thousands of flights were cancelled in the past 5 days as protests became increasingly violent. Police have arrested 149 people accused of taking part in illegal assemblies and violence. Meanwhile, Afghanistan's President Ashraf Ghani has said the Taliban will recognize legitimacy of the Kabul government on the first day of intra-Afghan talks. Speaking in Kabul, Ghani said a joint statement will be issued to establish legality of his government. Ghani said no new deals will be considered in the intra-Afghan negotiations. The Afghan president said Afghan national defense and security forces will not be compromised. The talks between Taliban and Afghan government are expected to be held in a European capital within the next few weeks. Taliban have repeatedly refused to be part of any intra-Afghan dialogue that recognizes the legitimacy of Ghani's government. Britain's former Finance Minister Philip Hammond says Britain's Parliament can block a no-deal Brexit. Hammond says Prime Minister Boris Johnson and his advisers are intentionally setting conditions to force a no-deal Brexit. The former Chancellor says any attempt to bypass Parliament will propel the United Kingdom into a constitutional crisis. He says demands to remove the Irish border backstop is Johnson's wrecking strategy to put the UK on an inevitable path to crash out of the EU. Hammond says a no-deal Brexit is a betrayal of the referendum to leave the European Union. He says he is confident Parliament has the means to express its opposition to a no-deal exit. Johnson has announced the UK will leave the EU in October with or without a deal. The UN Refugee Agency has asked European governments to urgently allow in rescued migrants who are now stranded in the Mediterranean Sea. More than 500 migrants are marooned at sea as countries argue over who should take them. UNHCR Special Envoy Vincent Cochetel says storms are coming and conditions are only going to get worse in the near future. The migrants are aboard 2 ships chartered by humanitarian aid groups. French charities SOS Mediterranean and MSF have rescued a total of 356 migrants on board the Ocean Viking vessel. Another 150 migrants have been aboard the Open Arms NGO ship for 12 days. The Italian government is refusing to let migrants land on its shores unless European Union partners help take them in. More news coming up, but after a short break, stay tuned. Welcome back. Now moving on with the news stories. The death toll in rain-related incidents in India's southwest Kerala state has jumped from 60 to 92. This year's monsoon has wreaked havoc across South Asia, killing over 1,000 people since the start of July. Officials say 34 people have been injured and 61 others reported missing in various incidents in the region. India has been hit the hardest by this year's monsoon, with over 750 people dying across the country. The Indian Met Department says the southwest monsoon is showing signs of intensifying over Kerala, sparking fears of fresh flooding. Meanwhile, the rains have killed 113 people in Nepal, 97 in Bangladesh and 59 in Pakistan. Meanwhile, in Greece, fanned by strong winds, wildfire has razed tracts of pine forest on the Evia island. The blaze led to villagers being evacuated following an appeal from the authorities to assistance from its European partners. A state of emergency was declared at the second largest Greek island of Evia. Over 227 firefighters along with 6 helicopters and 6 aircraft were battling the blaze. The inferno is generating clouds of thick smoke that engulf the capital, Athens. Croatia and Italy are expected to send help after an appeal was made for airborne firefighting equipment from Greek authorities. In the postmodern world, chivalrous behavior is fast becoming an endangered virtue. The flag bearers of aristocracy, the Britons, however, have found a way to keep their borderline eccentrics alive. The annual Chap Olympiad in southern England has found a unique way to celebrate gentlemanly conduct. We have more in this report.
It was dapper suits, vintage frocks and cucumber sandwiches all round at the Chap Olympiad, a contest with a very British twist. The extravagant event saw competitors trying to outdo each other in unconventional ways. The festival includes competitions like picnic vaulting, where contestants use walking sticks to vault over a couple taking a picnic. Challengers also try to beat each other by not spilling tea while riding a bicycle. The organisers say the idea behind the event is to test gentlemanly skills.
Umbrella jousting is our key event, and it really sort of tests the skills of a gentleman in holding a furled umbrella and a briefcase while riding a bicycle and being charged at by another chap on a bicycle with the same equipment. So it's really quite difficult, and it's all about coordination and handling of the gentlemanly skills, and there's not really much sporting involved. I mean, we really avoid any sporting tests. We're tests.
To be able to be light-hearted and not take things too seriously, and that's what I like about it. That's what draws me to it as well, and the characters in the games. I think it's fantastic.
This year, the Chap Olympiad was postponed for a day due to extremely British windy conditions.
A drink made from date palms is highly sought after in Tunisia, especially during the hot summer months. Tunisians say the drink is a part of their identity. This report has more.
Palm trees matter the most for Tunisians after God. A popular drink of choice among them is the date palm drink or legmi, but the delicate drink is not easy to extract.
Choosing the palm tree before making the cut. It is necessary to choose a big and mature palm tree for good legmi to drink and a good amount of juice.
To extract the juice, Musa climbs the palms barefoot. He carefully cuts the bark to cause a reaction from the palm that makes its sap rise. To keep it fresh, he places bottles of ice in the can that the sap flows into overnight. Then the juice is immediately frozen until it's poured for sale.
In this summer, legmi has its own specifications, and not everyone can make it. In summer, it is fragile because of the heat. The temperature is very, very high. It is fragile, so it cannot sit in the heat because it rots and becomes vinegar.
Locals fear pollution from factories are threatening the palm trees. State-owned Tunisian chemical group has been processing phosphate in the area since the 1970s and has been blamed for putting the oasis at risk.
European stocks have fallen after a positive start as Germany's economy went into reverse, reviving fears of global recession. Europe's biggest economy released numbers showing a fractional shrinking in the second quarter because of the Sino-US trade war. The Euro Stoxx 600, London's FTSE and France's CAC all dipped. Wall Street futures gauges were also slipped marginally. Asian stocks ticked up after Washington delayed tariffs on some Chinese imports. Japan's Nikkei gained over 1%, while South Korea's Kospi rose 0.7%. The Shanghai Composite Index advanced over 0.5%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng, despite disruptions from large anti-government protests, rose 0.5%. At Cincinnati Masters in the United States, Swiss legend Roger Federer and world number 1 Novak Djokovic have reached the round of 16. Each player secured straight sets victory. Third seed Federer eased past Argentina's Juan Ignacio Londero, winning 6-3 and 6-4. The Swiss maestro won 83% of his second serve points and wrapped up the victory in 61 minutes. Federer is pursuing his 29th ATP Masters 1000 title. Earlier, the defending champion and top seed Djokovic defeated America's Sam Querrey 7-5 and 6-1. The Serb served up his 15th service ace on match point to make up for his slow start on the hard court. The win makes Djokovic the first to advance to the third round. Meanwhile, Swiss Stan Wawrinka edged Bulgaria's Grigor Dimitrov's 5-7, 6-4 and 7-6 in a roller coaster first-round match. Now, Manchester Premier League's champion Manchester City have avoided a transfer ban after admitting to breaching FIFA rules on signing youth players. The club was fined £315,000 for breaking regulations. The football governing body says City broke Article 19 by signing players under the age of 18. The club claims the breaches were a result of misinterpretation of the regulations. City face a separate investigation from UEFA regarding financial fair play. Earlier, another English club, Chelsea, was given a one-year transfer ban after breaking the rules on international transfers. Let's have a look at the weather update across the world. Well, with the weather update, we come to the end of this bulletin. For more news and updates, keep watching Indus News.